The Springboks versus All Blacks rematch is just around the corner, and in this video I'll be giving my Springboks 15 that I believe is the strongest that they could go with in the second test match. Now I should clarify, this probably isn't what they will go with, because Rassie Erasmus, if it is anything like what we saw when the Springboks took on Australia, the second test match is going to have drastic changes from what we saw last week. But this 15 that I've come up with, it's more so based off who played well in the first match, as well as their recent form of who would be the strongest side to take on the All Blacks this weekend. But jumping straight into it, in terms of the front row, if it was based off the strongest that they can go with, I believe at the moment that is Oxnard number 1, Bongi Mbonambi number 2, and Frans Malherbe number 3. So that would mean an unchanged front row from what we did see in the last test match. Overall, they were very strong. The scrums were relatively even, although a late advantage did go the way of the Springboks. Now, if they are going to be rotating their squad for this contest, more than likely we will either see Gerhard Stennekamp in the starting lineup, or maybe even the return of Steven Kitsoff, although I don't believe they'll throw him straight in the deep end, instead maybe having him come off the bench. Malcolm Marx, fantastic player when he comes off the bench, hasn't really been given too many starting minutes as of late, but lately has also had a few un-Malcolm Marx-like errors that we've been seeing. Normally that man's line-out accuracy is as close to 100% as any hooker in World Rugby, whereas over the last few games we have seen a couple loose line-outs. I don't know whether that's necessarily completely his fault, but Mbonambi, anytime he started recently, he's been extremely solid. And speaking of extremely solid, of course, Frans Malherbe, they don't come much more solid than the big tight head prop. But in the locking duo, this is where I would have Ebenezer number 4, number 5, Roa Nokia. So that would mean taking out Peter Steph-Toy from the locking duo. He did play 4 in the last contest. That was due to the fact that Ebenezer had a bit of an injury early on in the week. He was alright to play though, and he had a tremendous game coming off the bench as the number 19. But I would return him back into the starting side here. Number 4 for him, and then number 5, Roa Nokia. I think that he had a really underrated game up against the All Blacks. He was consistent at line-out time. He had to go on and off the field quite a bit, which, to be honest, can sometimes break a player's momentum. But for him, just seemed like any time he made his way back out there was completely fine. And something that I've learned quite recently is Salman Murat is not a very popular man. And the reason I say that is in our Springboks prediction video that we do each week of what we think Rassie will go with, myself and Rugby put him in the starting side for this contest rather than Roa Nokia, who he had coming off the bench. And there are so many comments saying not just that Murat shouldn't be in the starting side, but that he shouldn't be even in the Springboks team. Yet there is a small chance that he could be captain if Rassie goes with as muddled up as a side as he did in the second match up against the Australians. But yeah, if you were ever wondering who at the moment a lot of people do not like in that Springbok side, Salman Murat at the moment does seem to be leading that charge. But moving on to the loose forward trio, Sia Khaleesi, the injury doesn't look too good, although there have been rumours that he might be alright to play this weekend, which would be insane because his face got caved in over the weekend. That decision, of course, has brought quite a bit of controversy, but then saying that the whole match has. I don't think I've seen so many individual moments in a game be critiqued as this first matchup between the Springboks and the All Blacks, but with that Sia Khaleesi injury, it does mean they will need a new number 6, and I think that this is the perfect chance to put Mako van Staden back into the starting lineup. Now, they may also look at the option of Quagga Smith, but I just love watching that man come off the bench. He changes a game late for the Springboks. Now, there is a very, very thin chance that we might even see Peter Steph-Toy playing that number 6 jersey. Yes, he doesn't normally play 6, but they've played him at 4, they've played him at 5, they've played him at 7. Might as well fill in the numbers in between and give him that number 6 jersey for this match, and then that would give Ben Jason Dixon an opportunity to right his wrongs from the first test match, not quite finding his feet in test match number 1, but I would have Mako van Staden, and then number 7, this is where Peter Steph-Toy would make his way into my strongest Springbok lineup. Now, he is just a phenomenal player. No matter where you have him playing, no matter what number you have on his back, he's going to give you 100%, and he's just been such a top player for such a long time now. Every time he's up against top opposition or a lower ranked side, he brings his A game, and it's exactly what kind of mentality the Springboks want to have in their camp during those matches as well. Just fire you up to play your absolute best. Number 8, this is where I would once again give Jasper Wiese an opportunity, although Ulrich Lowe off the bench I thought was very strong. So there is a chance that Rassie may actually look at putting Lowe in the starting lineup, have Wiese coming off the bench later on in the game. But the benefit that the Springboks have at the moment compared to the All Blacks, now this is quite a harsh statement, but I'm going to say it, the Springboks have a little bit more depth because the All Blacks at the moment, they don't seem to have a bench. You know, there are so many inexperienced players there, and even the inexperienced guys, half of them are a little bit out of form. Whereas for the Springboks, you look at someone like an Ulrich Lowe, who's only had, 2 or 3 Springbok caps and has already looked like a top-level player who could start a match up against the best sides all around the world. So that is the big difference at the moment. The Springboks, definitely in that loose forward trio, have quite a nice bit of depth, and they'll look to use it here up against the All Blacks. But now moving on to the back line, number 9. This is where, if we're basing it off the strongest lineup possible for the Springboks, I think we could see a switch here. And that would bring Grant Williams into the starting side. Now, Williams, yes, every once in a while he has a little bit of a mistake near the end of a game. We saw it up against the All Blacks, but then we also saw him score a try. And he also had more defenders beaten than Kobus Reinach. So I think it's only a matter of time until we see Grant Williams get a start in that Springbok jersey. I'd like to see it happen before Faf de Klerk returns, because I feel like once de Klerk does come back in, Grant Williams, they will look to still use him as that 9 and 14 cover off the bench. But he's good enough to be in the starting side. So hopefully we see that at some stage in the future. But at the same time, I can understand why you'd have him coming off the bench rather than starting, because of that late impact and because the bomb squad at the moment, it is on fire. So you don't really want to break it up. But now moving on to that 10 jersey. They've got 3 options. And I do think that if Rassie goes with a bit of an experimental side here, we may not just see a change at 10, but we may also see a change at 12, who also plays fly half. You know what direction I'm going, and I'm saying maybe there's a chance that Rassie will go Mani Libbok 10, Handré Pollard number 12 for this upcoming game. Now, it's a very slim one. And with Rassie, things that most coaches wouldn't think of, he's thought of many times and does consider. Overall, we haven't seen Mani Libbok in a Springbok kit for a very long time. It's always been Pollard and Sasha Feinberg Ngome Zulu. Now, in the strongest Springbok lineup possible, for myself here, my starting XV, I would have Sasha keep that number 10 jersey and partner him with Grant Williams or Kobus Reinach. Either way, it is going to be quite successful. Handré Pollard, though, we cannot take away from what he's been able to do up against the All Blacks in the past. And he would fit quite nicely into this current Springboks team. But I do have a feeling that if you put in Pollard and then you have eventually Faf de Klerk back and then Willie LaRue at 15, you just lose that X factor on attack that the Springboks do currently have. Now, Sasha Feinberg Ngome Zulu as the number 10, it's looking pretty promising as a future option that they could continue going with. And unfortunately, because of that, it means that Mani Libbok is stuck playing for Western Province. But eventually, he might find himself back in there. And perhaps it is this weekend that we see that Mani Libbok return. But now moving on to the centres, I believe the strongest combo is still what they consistently go with. That is Damien de Allende at number 12. And then on the outside, Jesse Kriel at number 13. Now, I was quite surprised with a few of Jesse Kriel's stats from that first All Blacks match. He made 5 tackles, but he actually missed 3, whereas he's normally an extremely solid player when it comes to the defence, and I would argue that those 5 tackles that he made were still extremely crucial for the overall outcome, for the overall way that the Springboks were able to play. He does look like the best option, although if we're seeing an experimental side this weekend, we might see either Kane Moody or maybe Lucanio Am goes into that number 13 jersey. At this stage, though, it's only hearsay. We don't know what Rassie is thinking. I don't even think Rassie knows what he's thinking half the time. He just says, right, we'll go with that, and then it happens, and then it works. I'd love to have that ability, but it is certainly a skill to have, and there's plenty of skill in those centre pairings at the moment for the Springboks, as well as the back three, which is where we're going now. No Kutli Arendse for this week due to his head knock that he did take last week. Sadly ran straight into the elbow of Rieko Ioane, and before you say anything, that statement sounds bad. We're talking about an elbow down, tucked in, next to the side. It's not a Sam Cane situation, so he will not be there, which brings in Makazole Mapimpi, or they may even look at Kane and Moody out on that wing. But I believe Makazole Mapimpi, you've got to give him a chance here. Anytime he's played for the Springboks in recent times, he's been strong. He's just a very good option. Would be marking more than likely with Will Jordan, so defensively, Mapimpi hasn't been too bad lately either. So that is who I'd have out on that left wing side. For the right wing, it's very hard to take Chisel and Colby out, and that's why I haven't. Because if Rassi is going with his strongest side, I think we will see Chislin out on that wing. Whereas if Rassi is going a little bit more with a mixture of what could be, this is actually where we could see Kane and Moody. And I'll be honest, I just wish I knew who was going to be in that Springboks lineup. Whether it is going to be a completely changed side or whether it's going to be relatively similar. It seems to be 50-50 at the moment in terms of some people think that it will be heavily changed. Some people think they'll go with the strongest side to secure the Rugby Championship and then make those changes up against Argentina. But number 15, this is also where I haven't made a change. A little bit of a bold one here, but I've stuck with Apelele Fassi. The fact that Willie LaRue hasn't played makes me think he will be playing in the second test match up against New Zealand, but I believe at the moment, if they're looking towards the future and they're looking at just off current form, what happened in that first game up against New Zealand, with the exception of the yellow card, I feel was a really strong performance from Apelele Fassi at the back. Now, there is some criticism, which was at times defensively it seemed to be lacking a little bit, but then at the same time, he was on a hiding to nothing out on the wing when there were like 2 or 3 All Blacks flying straight at him. It does make it very tricky, and you have to ask the question, would Willie LaRue have been any better in that scenario? Perhaps he would have held off a little bit longer than Apelele Fassi and hoped that someone else was able to get back and help him defensively. But Fassi on attack, it's still very underrated because he had the most running meters out of any player in the URC competition, yet he hasn't had too many running meters for the Springboks as of yet. Saying that, he made 62 meters in the first game, the second most of any player, only behind Sasha Feinberg Ngome Zulu. He beat defenders, he had clean breaks, he's a fantastic player, so he's my number 15 and my strongest Springboks XP. But nonetheless, like I said, the Springboks lineup, we're still a little bit away from finding out who will be in the side, but when we do, we will have the video coming out on the channel. I do want to know from you guys though, do you feel Rassi will go with an extremely changed side like the second match up against Australia, or will it be very similar to the first match with a couple exceptions due to the injuries, such as bringing Van Staden in, or such as putting Mapimpi out on the wing, and that is what he'll go with in this next match up against New Zealand? But also do let me know who you think is the current in-form Springboks 15. I am curious to see your guys' opinion. Or also let me know why Salman Murat is so hated. I'm actually going to read you a couple quick comments that we had on that video that I talked about. Someone put Murat is as useful as taking sand to the beach. That's a nice one, isn't it? What? Murat, no way. The Wallabies were too tough for him. He won't last 10 minutes. Murat, what? This guy don't belong in this Bok team. He's a poor option. Murat is absolutely useless. It just goes on. There's like 20 of them. And no other player, I don't think, that we've mentioned has had that kind of backlash, I guess you'd say, in terms of not wanting him in the starting side. But nonetheless, I do thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Tell me what your favourite colour is. I don't know why. And we'll see you all for the next one.